My name is Mike Sterling, and I just wanted to share it with you. And back in February 2020, I had surgery, have tonsils and lymph nodes on the left side of my neck removed for cancer. Well, both my tonsils and lymph nodes on the left side of my neck removed for cancer. And I was up at OHSU, and 5 days after the original surgery, I hemorrhaged. The nurses and doctors had told us that, as unlikely as it was that I would hemorrhage if it happened, it was an emergency, and then if my wife was there, she needed to run, and they emphasized run, not walk, to the nurse's station to get help. So on the morning of February 10th, I started to hemorrhage. My wife was there, thankfully, and we were pretty concerned. She ran out, got the nurses. I was scared. Two things popped in my head as I was coughing up and spewing blood. One, that I could die, and two, that whatever happened in the next few minutes was probably going to be painful. Knew they'd be shoving stuff down my throat and probing and all kinds of things. So immediately my anxiety started to ramp up. And as the doctors, they code blue, so doctors and nurses flooding into the room, and as they started getting into my mouth and putting tubes down my throat, suction tubes down my throat, the panic started. I could feel the panic coming on, and I quickly started just repeating a prayer, very simple prayer: Jesus, hold me. And I said it a few times. Suddenly I became calm, and around that time I remember hearing a very distinct voice in my head that said, it's going to be okay. And what was interesting is that I understood at that moment that what I was being told was not that I was going to live necessarily, but that whether I lived or died, I was going to be okay. And it only added to my comfort. And as people kept coming into the room, and I think before that experience, I kind of assumed that doctors and nurses in those situations were very calm. Well, they're not. They were yelling at each other, maybe. One nurse shoved a bunch of stuff down my gauze down my throat, and another doctor take it out in no uncertain terms. Poor phlebotomist kept telling her to take blood for a transfusion possibly, and then telling her no, and I kept sticking my arm out. I mean, it was a lot of confusion and panic on their part, but through it all, I had almost an out-of-body experience. It wasn't that I was above the room watching anything, but I observed everything. I was hyper-aware of all the people around me, and the nurse patted me on the back, telling me I was doing okay. And I stayed very calm, continued to cough when they told me to, and I don't know how long it lasted. Sherry, my wife, said maybe about 15 minutes she thought it might have lasted. And I remember thinking, as they got ready to wheel me out to the emergency for surgery, I remember thinking, I need to smile and wave at my wife as I leave so she won't be so scared. And I did. Later on that evening after my surgery, and I was back in the room, and I actually was feeling well enough to walk around the floor a little bit, sitting on the edge of my bed, resting, and one of the doctors came in. One of the first doctors had been on the scene early that morning, came in. I actually had spit blood up all over her face. And I looked at her and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry for spitting up on your face." And she laughed and said, "Oh, no problem." And then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "You were the calmest person in the room." And I remember thinking at the time, well, I know why. And the other voice in my head, going to be okay. I had no idea back on February 10th, 2020, what I had ahead of me for the next 8 months and beyond, as I continue to struggle with the consequences of some other medical issues that occurred later on. But through it all, I've remembered those words, that God telling me no matter what happens, it's going to be okay. And that's given me a lot of strength in the time since, a lot of peace.